Chief Sustainability Officer of E.sun Financial Holdings. Today, I would like to share on the topic, building resilience, a holistic financial approach to climate challenges. E.sun, I would like to introduce our own. E.sun was established in 1992 and named after Taiwan's highest mountain, E.sun. We aim to be the best bank in Taiwan. In 2002, we established E.sun Financial Holding Company. Today, our group includes banking, securities, venture capital, and asset management. Our total assets are $140 billion, and our market cap is $16 billion, ranking among the top 20 listed companies in Taiwan. Taiwan is an export-oriented economy. 98% of Taiwanese companies are SMEs. So, international trends like ESG directly impact Taiwan's enterprises, especially SMEs. However, SMEs lack capital, talent, resources, and expertise in the ESG transition. As climate change intensifies, both transition and physical risks are rising globally, including in Taiwan. In September, in Hualien, eastern Taiwan, heavy rain caused a barrier lake to collapse. Unfortunately, 19 people died. You can see the photos. Tens of thousands of volunteers come to Hualien to help clean up the mud. Many say Taiwan's most beautiful scenery is its people. This shows our empathy, helping others, dedication, and friendliness. Just like ESG. We don't do it for ourselves or our own company. We do it for our next generation and for all people around the world. Climate change and extreme weather events cause more frequent damage. To mitigate physical risks, we develop a database system that directly connects Taiwan's climate data to evaluate flood risks for the location of our collateral. In 2022, Taiwan's government selected 6 leading financial institutions to form a coalition, working together across 6 key areas to promote sustainable finance. E.sun is honored to lead the policies and guidelines group. We developed 3 guidelines for Taiwan institutions, including carbon reduction targets, about how to reduce emissions, and supporting transition finance. These are vital tools for helping Taiwan's financial institutions achieve net zero. To exert our positive impact, since 2021, E.sun has been inviting the corporate, medical, and academic sectors to participate in the E.sun ESG Sustainability Initiative. In 2023, we created a sustainable transition platform and further integrated financial and non-financial solutions to support our clients. Gradually, we have brought together business, government agencies, and academia to promote industry-wide sustainable development. In 2025, our 5th initiative's main topic focuses on AI and talent empowerment. We believe that cultivating talent is crucial for a sustainable transition in the current AI era. Taiwan's primary industries include petrochemicals, steel, cement, and electronics. These sectors are highly energy intensive, with electricity being a major carbon emitter. Currently, over 80% of Taiwan's power comes from natural gas and coal, with coal accounting for 39%. This energy mix is typical in many Asian countries, but differs significantly in Europe and US. Decarbonization for these kinds of companies large depends on national energy policies. Carbon emissions are only surface of the problems. The real issue lies beneath the iceberg. As financial institutions in Asia, we should not withdraw funding from high carbon companies. Instead, we should leverage our capital to support their transition. Focusing solely on linear emissions reductions could cause companies to struggle to survive, ultimately impacting people's lives. In 2025, we collaborated with a professional consulting firm to create an E.sun low-carbon transition plan. We classified our lending and investment portfolios into 7 tiers, based on the transition finance standards and different countries' practices. For instance, Tiers 1 and 2 follow the strictest standard, like the Europe. Tiers 3 and 4 mirror Asian standards. Our goal is to upgrade portfolios in Tiers 3 and 4 to reach Tiers 1 and 2, and to help Tiers 5 and 6 achieve at least Tier 4. Moreover, by evaluating the transition maturity within each tier, we can offer customized transition solutions. The just transition principle highlights leave no one behind. Wealthy and developed nations should assist climate vulnerable and developing countries. Large companies should support their supply chains, and financial institutions have to stand by businesses. Climate change is a global issue. Through collective efforts in mitigation and adaptation, we can turn this crisis into opportunities. Thank you for your listening. Thank you.
Wonderful. Louis Chang, thank you so much. We appreciate your partnership as well. That is Louis Chang from E.sun Bank. On that note, we're now going to move on to a panel discussion, delivering resilience, turning climate commitments into action. And to lead that conversation, I'd like to call upon Rubens Filho, the Executive Manager for Environment, UN Global Compact. Welcome, Ruben.
Hello. Well, thank you very much. I'm very thrilled to be here. So we're going to discuss how to implement actually the climate commitments and how to actually turn that into actions. Not only the BNDES that are very necessary for everyone right now, but how to actually to understand that we need to speed up some actions like the reforestation industry, for example, the development of green jobs, for example. So we have so much to talk here, and I'm very thrilled to invite the panelists to join me on stage. I'd like to invite Nabil Moura Kadri. He's the Deputy Managing Director of Environment of the Brazilian Development Bank. Leonardo Fleck, Sustainability Head Senior of the Santander. Maud Chalamet, she's the Director of the Brazil Green Finance Institute. And Makala Kishnan from McKinsey Global Institute Partner. Please join me, and a round of applause for them, please. Okay, thank you very much. So good to see some familiar faces, especially you, Mikala. We worked together at the United Nations in September, discuss about green jobs, and green jobs actually is action, right? So thank you very much, everyone, for being here again, and thank you, Rafael. He's here replacing Nabil. So I have a few questions for you, and we need actually to speed it up a little bit. Because we are running out of time. So, Rafael, I'm going to start with you because the BNDES, the Brazilian National Development Bank, has been very central to Brazil's transformation in terms of the green transition. So, how is the bank adapting its tool to de-risk climate investments and bring private capital in?
Well, thank you, Rubens. Thank you for the invitation. I understand that you have translation.
We do. If you like to speak in
yes,
Portuguese,
since
so
in Brazil, I work at a Brazilian bank. Bom, pessoal, boa tarde. Obrigado, Rubens.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Rubens. Well, the Brazilian Development Bank has really made an effort to increase investment in nature-based solutions, especially when it comes to native forests. And it's a new sector. It's a sector that's not structured as the renewable sources sector is, for example. So it needs new tools to be developed. We have the Climate Fund, which is a very attractive resource for this type of investment. But this investment in native forests still represents a series of risks because it's a novelty, because we don't have many concrete cases of investments, and thus it demands instruments to reduce that risk. So we have been working on three things that I'd like to emphasize. One is long-term contract models for the purchasing of carbon for restoration projects that may serve as guarantees for financing. We're talking about long-term projects that start performing after 5 to 6 years, and that will be financed for 25 years. So how can I use these contracts as a guarantee? And that will solve part of the issue. And there is a part that it precedes the project starting to perform, and we have partnerships with world banks that often serve as guarantors in the beginning of the project. But in talking to partners like the IDB, we are talking about developing a guarantor fund to serve as guarantee before the projects start performing. And lastly, we have started to work with the insurance sector in this discussion, developing new insurance products for this phase. You have a couple of climate risks when it comes to this project, including prolonged droughts during the beginning of the project or fires that may occur in the region, in addition to the issue of performance. Since we don't have a history of results, how do I know when I'm looking at a project that in 5 years it is actually going to capture the amount of carbon that is foreseen, that it will create the carbon credits that are the revenue of the project? So how can I make sure? Can I have a performance insurance for this type of project? So trying to bring things that already worked for renewable energy and infrastructure to the forest sector, especially talking about native Brazilian species that have long growth cycles and that vary in terms of species. And we need to develop all of this. And we really need innovation, of course, and that's another discussion. And this innovation will help reduce that risk in the future as well.
Leonardo, here you're representing the private sector, the private banks. So I'd like to know from you, how is Santander embedding climate resilience into its lending in investments?
Thank you. Rubens, my colleague, panelists, and all the audience. Thank you so much for coming to Brazil to enjoy COP in Belém. I hope that you are all feeling very welcome by our fellow Brazilians. We have a history of working on climate in the bank. We have a very robust commitment to achieve 220 billion euros in sustainable transactions by 2030. We had a target of 125 by the end of this year. We actually achieved it 18 months ahead of the deadline. We have a very robust sustainable taxonomy that is, of course, inspired on the European, but it goes beyond what the European taxonomy dictates. And that gives us security to earmark those transactions as sustainable, to give security to our clients so they can also communicate those transactions and it can contribute to their own targets of sustainable financing. But what we need to focus on now as a community in this space, in my opinion, is we need to figure out ways of de-risking capital at a much larger scale than we have done so far. We have done a lot of pilots, we have done a lot of small initiatives. We can definitely learn a lot from them. We need to capture those lessons and then figure out how to do bigger things. When we look at the types of technologies that we need to finance to achieve the climate goals, there are many mainstream technologies that we all know very well: solar, wind, batteries. All those technologies, they are getting their financing because there's track record. We know how to pricify risk of those types of investments. But there are another group of technologies which are more nascent, more emergent. They're quite new, and they involve a much higher perception and sometimes actual risks that we need to figure out how to tackle, right? The key point is everybody needs to take a little bit more risk. I used to work for Gordon Moore. I worked with him for 10 years, and he used to tell me that if we don't fail, we are not innovating enough. That is a very powerful say. But he used to say also that we need to fail really fast. And we only can fail fast if we are learning from the failures. And we need to learn together. I can't learn rapid enough from my own actions. I need to collaborate and share lessons with my peers. That's why it's important for us to be here, to be in alliances, collaborating and sharing information. Blended finance and public guarantees. Those are the instruments that we are seeing greater appetite from the market players, and we need to focus much more on them. I think you mentioned several examples of the great work that BNDES has been doing. It's a motive of pride for all of us, all the progress that BNDES is doing in many fronts, including restoration. And we have been partnering with BNDES. We have actually helped BNDES unlock the climate fund for restoration for the first time for a restoration company in Brazil. And we are now helping many others to find the same path and getting access to the funding from BNDES, which is subsidized and allows many of these startups to be able to ramp up their operations in a much faster pace than it would be otherwise, right? The key thing is we need to figure out when we blend commercial and public capital, we need to figure out ways of stretching those public dollars as much as we can because they are constrained, right? We have seen in multiple panels, ODA is very limited. We see the 1.3 trillion targets from Baku to Belém, 2035. That's going to depend on a lot of private capital. But a lot of the capital goes to risky assets. So how can we use those scarce public resources, which are much more flexible, to the risk that much larger pool of private capital? And blended is a really cool solution. Public guarantees is where we need to focus a little more now. Some studies show that actually for every dollar that the government or an MDB allocates to public guarantees, you can leverage more than $10 from the private sector. So that is about mobilization of private sector capital. The good news is that we are seeing a lot of movement in the MDB community. The MDBs are being reformed. We see IDB, we see IFC, and many others actually taking the lead on a lot of innovation in this front and moving their models to actually crowd in private capital instead of crowding out private capital, which is, again, much more efficient use of their own resources when we look at impact and the impact they can achieve. In Brazil, the government is actually also innovating quite significantly on this space, and I hope that we can share those lessons to other countries. We not only developed over the last few years a very robust ecological transition framework with several policies, but also the Ministry of Finance created the largest blended finance program in the country, probably one of the largest in the world. It's called the Eco Invest program. Maybe you have heard, people are talking about this program in many panels. This program offers subsidized credit for banks, for large banks, 1% rate per year against the benchmark rate in the market of 15, so it's highly subsidized. But in exchange for that, the banks need to leverage the capital, bring capital from outside Brazil, and then passing that discount to the clients while absorbing the FX costs and other possible costs associated with investing in transactions that banks probably would not finance, right? So in less than 12 months, the government issued 2 bidding processes for banks to get access to that capital, and more than 75 billion reals were mobilized to be spent over the next 2 years by more than 10 banks in Brazil. So it's a quite significant sum. If you look at all the sustainable transactions that were mapped out by the Climate Bonds Institute in 2024, that was 70 billion reals. So we are injecting a huge amount of capital in the economy for sustainability. And this will help Brazil achieve the vision that the government has for Brazil to become a global hub of climate solutions.
Okay, thank you very much. You gave me just insight for a last question for you, so I need actually to bear in mind. Maud, you've helped unlock capital elsewhere. So what innovations could help Brazil move from climate intent to bankable projects?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question, for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be at a COP that focuses on action and delivery. Going from pledges, promises to implementation, it is really at the heart of the Green Finance Institute. So it is this pragmatic approach that we really much would like to see everywhere. The Green Finance Institute has been created in 2019 as a bridge, as a non-for-profit organization and as a bridge between the project developers and the City of London. So the project developers and where the money stays. So we address what we call the execution gap. And I think this is what we look in terms of pragmatical approach toward action. This execution gap comes from, you have on one side all the global commitment from government, from corporate, from investors, and you have the real economy made of different project developers that have excellent ideas. They are looking at new technologies and do not find out how to finance their operation. So we are supporting those projects in developing their finance models, in getting the right narrative for them to build up the trust, to address the private sector needs and to build the trust in terms of risk sharing and to have the right narrative also to get them on board. And what I think it's very important also to highlight is that those projects that we support, somehow they're a very small team and they are most of them made of engineers, people that do not understand the financier's mind. So it's very important also for them to understand where they can find those capitals, including grant, including concessional finance, where do they access climate funds, for example, to get funding to de-risk their operation. So it's very important to be close to them and to support them to get more robust project to be presented to investors. And the second piece of work, which I think is extremely important, it has been highlighted a couple of times today, but it's very important to remember, it is the collaborative approach, because most of those projects that we support, and it can be in any sectors, nature-based solution, energy, decarbonization of industry, one of the main problem issue that they face is around off-taker as well off-taker agreement, as well as fixed stock supply. So it's very important to work with them on the finance piece of work, but also on the technical approach for them to implement their technologies, but also to support also all the policy needs that they have, the policy asks that they have, and to feed back to government on what really can make the enablers and that can make their projects grow. It is so important that they do not have access to all of this ecosystem. So we have been with a lot of different collaborators, a lot of colleagues, I see colleagues here in the room. We operate in a coordination way in order to be able to highlight the needs and the demand that they have. And just to give an example, we are working in Brazil, partnering within the decarbonization of industry hub and the low carbon hydrogen hub. They are part of the Brazilian investment platform, which is led by the Finance Ministry, the Ministry of Industry, and the Ministry of Mines and Energy. We are extremely lucky to be in Brazil and to have this country platform set up, as it gives a set of direction. It gives a priority of where the government, what is the government ambition, and where they want to focus on for the next years. The secretariat is held by the BNDES, and it allows us, amongst different also players, to bring faster, I'll ask the projects has to bring this faster to the ministries. And when you look at one transaction, one deal that can be made under this platform, under the different hubs, and you see that it can go faster and at scale, you can, and that's what we are doing in Brazil, come from one transaction to transition. This is how we operate.
Well, thank you very much. You already gave me some examples that I were asking to. Michaela, thank you very much for being here with us again. So from your research, I'd like to know from you, what are the key levers that turn climate action into real economic and social resilience?
Well, it's wonderful to be here. Just to quickly introduce myself, I'm with the McKinsey Global Institute, which is McKinsey & Company's business and economics research arm. So we do research on a variety of these topics. We've heard a lot about some really great examples with finance, a lot of which has been focused on the transition and decarbonization. So maybe just to change things up a little bit, I want to talk about climate resilience and adaptation. That's really been a focus of the dialogue that's already happening at this COP and will continue to happen at this COP. And I think a lot of the lessons that we've talked about on the transition side will also be helpful as we get into adaptation. But just to orient, we are going to be publishing some research in about a month on the topic of climate adaptation. And as we did the work, a starting point of the work was actually this realization that in many ways human beings have been adapting for centuries, if not millennia. We saw some really interesting examples in our research of Mesopotamians implementing irrigation systems, of the Low Countries, which is the Netherlands, implementing elevated structures to prevent from flooding. So in some ways, adaptation is quite different from decarbonization in the sense that many of these technologies exist, they're proven, and they have what economists call a positive benefit to cost ratio, in that the cost to implement these solutions is much less than the benefits in terms of avoided damages. So great investment, right? There's lots and lots of benefits. We know what to do. It's not like we're inventing hydrogen electrolyzers. This is an investment that makes sense. What's the problem? There's two problems. The first is if you look at the data even today, despite the fact that we have many proven cost-effective solutions, the world still has not implemented solutions to protect today's climate. So for example, if we think about places that are exposed to heat stress around the world, this is extremely hot, humid conditions of a month or more. Less than 20% of people that live in heat stress-prone regions today have implemented cooling systems like air conditioning. So for some reason, despite the fact that this is such a great set of solutions, positive benefit to cost ratios, we have massive resiliency gaps already today. That's one problem. Second problem is that the climate is not static, it's changing. On our current trajectory of emissions, despite all the efforts the world is making to decarbonize, we're due to hit 1.5 C of warming sometime in the next decade, 2 C of warming sometime by 2050. And so we need to plan not just for the climate of today, but for the climate of the future. Remember that heat stress example that I gave you. Under a 2C world, 55% more land area will be exposed to those heat stress conditions. So people are already not protected today, and more places will be exposed. So those are the two issues. So now I think this is a helpful lesson in saying, why is capital not flowing, right? If these are positive benefit to cost ratio solutions, they're proven solutions, we have them, why is finance not going to where it needs to go? Why are people not investing in these solutions? And I think it's a very helpful lesson learned from the transition that we can apply here, which is that finance is a part of the equation, but it's not everything. So you need both demand-side interventions and supply-side interventions. And what I mean by demand-side interventions is part of the reason people are not investing in these adaptation solutions is because they're not aware of their risks. They are prioritizing other forms of investments. They see these as intangible investments where the benefit is an avoided cost, not a revenue stream. And so we need a whole range of mechanisms, policy mechanisms on the demand side. And this is everything from, as you described, the role of insurance in incentivizing resilience. This is things like government standards to actually incentivize the build-out of adaptation solutions. The role of government in actually sending the demand signal that we want to invest in adaptation. There's a lot of conversation about national adaptation plans, which will provide the sort of certainty around the direction of travel on adaptation. So we need a lot of things on the demand side. And then on the supply side, we need finance to play a role. And I think there's, again, a lot of lessons learned from the transition that can be applied to adaptation as well. But the most important being finance alone is not going to be sufficient. We need demand side levers as well.
All right, thank you very much, Mikala. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, but this roundtable needed to answer one of our questions. Are we turning climate commitments into action? And I believe that yes, we are. We are like somehow turning climate commitments into action. Thank you very much for having us. Thank you, World Climate Foundation, for having us. Have a great event.